I'm going to segue into just talking about mindfulness a little bit. There's been so much research on the benefits of mindfulness. Simply put, our stress, or most of our stress, comes from an overactive mind pulling us in all directions. So whether it's ruminating about a past event and playing it over and over, I'm sure many of you can relate to that, right? You have a conversation that didn't go so well and you just keep playing it over and over, even though it happened a week ago. And then likewise, we find ourselves often just rushing ahead into the future, especially with worrisome things, worrying about things that may or may not even happen. So what happens then is there's clutter in the mind, and rather than being able to respond thoughtfully to everyday situations, we have these habitual and automatic responses because we aren't tuned into what is actually happening in the moment. And mindfulness practice really gives us the tools to meet the challenges that we face rather than having these knee-jerk reactions, right? So the power of mindfulness, and it really is powerful, is that it increases our resilience and improves our overall well-being. And some of the benefits, there are numerous benefits, I'm sure you're aware. It reduces anxiety and depression. It can reduce muscle tension, back pain. It can improve mood, sleep, our cognitive skills, our ability to concentrate and focus, and even our ability to become more creative. And these are things that are well documented. There have been thousands of studies done. So, don't take my word for it. Do your own research. Go and seek out some of these studies or articles. And something that really highlights for me mindfulness really well is a quote by Viktor Frankl. And he was a very well-known psychologist back in the 50s and also a Holocaust survivor. And he said, between stimulus and response is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. And that is so true, right? So we have the stimulus, that conversation that we don't like so much. And then we have the reaction or the response. And in there is this little bit of space if we allow ourselves to have it, right? Taking a purposeful pause before reacting. Even one breath can help so incredibly to refocus and to see or have the opportunity to thoughtfully respond instead of just habitually reacting. And this can be particularly useful when we're in conversations with people where there's just this habit, this habitual way of communicating, right? Family members or, people that we know well. And so it is incredibly important to take that pause, right? It's that space in which we have the power to choose how we are going to respond. And there's a fundamental assumption in mindfulness, and John Kabat-Zinn, who is considered the father of Western mindfulness, says it beautifully. As long as we are breathing, there's more right with us than wrong with us. And we come into this world already good enough. So in other words, we're perfect in our own imperfection, despite our own feelings of not being good enough or any other challenges that we face. So from this perspective, everything is workable. The glass is half full, right? Not half empty. It engenders a positive outlook. And so this is where mindfulness, it builds on that fundamental assumption. And I'm going to take a moment just to talk about the formal definition, which the one that we use at the Krame Center, because there are so many definitions of mindfulness, but the one that we like to use is by John Kabat-Zinn, who I just mentioned. And his definition is that mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So I'm going to say that again. It's the awareness that arises from paying attention in a very particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So I just want to unpack that for a moment, because there's three components there that I'm going to talk about. And this definition is really rich with information. So on purpose, well, that suggests our intent to be mindful. It's being purposeful in practicing mindfulness. And then in the present moment, well, that's the focus on this unfolding moment to moment experience, right? Because our present moment is fleeting and it's unfolding, but it is, happening moment to moment. So that means not, as I mentioned before, where a lot of our stress comes from, not ruminating about a past event or about a future outcome that may not happen. And so a lot of our stress comes from this kind of mind activity, which really distracts us from and diminishes our experience of the present moment, right? So how many times have you been with someone, but not fully with them, not present, and they're saying something and you actually don't hear them and ask them to repeat it because you're thinking about something else? And wouldn't you rather be in a moment where you're spending, moments are precious, because it's the moments in our life, these moments that we call the present moment, when we string those together, that's our life, folks. That's it. That's all she wrote. So it's not what happened in the past. It's not what's going to happen in the future. It's what's happening right now. So if you're with your child and your child it's a precious moment and your child is saying something or doing something that's just, adorable, but you're thinking about tomorrow at work or, the next thing that's coming up, you're missing that. And so you're missing the depth and richness of your own experience of life. And then lastly, the non-judgmentally part. And that's kind of tricky and hard for a lot of people. But this is the attitude that we bring to our practice. And adopting an attitude of curiosity, kindness, investigating, rather than labeling it with harsh judgment, right? And particularly this self-critical harsh judgment that we can all do so very easily. And there's a common denominator here. And what do you think that might be? Well, it's awareness. If we are not aware, we aren't able to be on purpose. We aren't able to be in the present moment, and we aren't able to change the attitude from one of judgment to one of curiosity, right? So there's a lot there in that definition, and so you might be thinking to yourself, well, how do I even do that? So it's about training the mind. Our attention is probably one of our most valuable resources. And our attention, when we let it get pulled all over just by the whims of what our mind wants to do. And by the way, that's how we're wired, and that's what our mind knows to do. So there's nothing wrong with us, right? And we were wired with these primal responses that primed us for survival in the wild, the millennia ago. But we no longer need to react in these ways because most of the time our life is not being threatened. It's really more about our self-identity in many cases that's being threatened. And not to minimize, of course, there are instances where someone is in real danger. But it's about training the mind to do what? To come back to the task at hand. And whether the task at hand is breathing, because we do use the breath so much in mindfulness, whether it's breathing, sending an email, having coffee with a friend, or a precious moment, like I mentioned, with your child. And so it's like, you're focusing on awareness of breath is one of our primary practices in mindfulness. It's where your mind wanders, you bring it back to the breath. It goes away, you bring it back. And this is why it's an ongoing practice. And so I have a lot of students who will say to me, oh, well, I can never be good at mindfulness. I can never be good at meditation because I can't get my mind to stop thinking and going all over the place. Well, it's not about stopping the thoughts. It's about how we relate to them. Oh, I'm having that thought again. Okay, notice it. Bring the mind back to the breath or to whatever it is you're doing. So it's this practice. It's almost like going to the gym, right? Mindfulness is your overall fitness level. And then meditation is the practice that I was just talking about. Your mind wanders, you bring it back. So in the gym, we go and we do a bicep curl. We do a bicep curl up and down, right? We're strengthening the muscle. So it's the same with our muscle of awareness or attention. The mind wanders, we bring it back. And then we begin to create space. We have less of this unneeded clutter in our minds. And in that space, we can begin to see what's actually happening. It creates room for new possibilities and creative problem solving and just a better enjoyment of life. So, and that in a nutshell, in a very quick overview, is what mindfulness is all about. And so now I would like to, unless Michael or Matthew, you have anything to add, I want to show the folks a couple of practices.
No, I think you scared Michael when you mentioned going to the gym and fitness level. Now, if you said going out to dinner, going out to eat, which that would have been fine. But
I was impressed with the bicep. That was yeah.
The whole bicep curl threw Michael off, man.
Catherine,
well, hey, here's one for you, Michael. So yeah, if you're out for dinner and you're with a friend, you haven't seen this friend in forever, and you're really excited and you're really present with them and you really want to talk, and the waiter comes and he says, oh, hello, welcome. Are you ready? Oh, we need just a minute. So, okay. Coming back to the moment, oh, yeah, so nice to see you. What have you been up to? Waiter comes back, kind of like the mind wandering. Waiter comes back. Oh, are you ready? Would you like to see the menu?
That analogy I completely relate to. I get it completely. I am interested in that concept of, and in many ways, I'm struck by the intersection of the three of us all sort of trying to get toward the same thing in terms of mental health and balance and keeping our eyes. I'm struck by the concept of the judgmental part, because I think that's such a key role. I see that with clients in practice. I see that in all our own lives. And so the pure discipline of is what I hear you saying. And I certainly went through the 8-week course, so I'm somewhat familiar with it, but not nearly as deep as you are. But just speak just for another minute or two on that judgmental part, because I think that's something that we all struggle with just in life, and so that's intriguing to me.
Yeah, and you know what? It is a difficult. It's very difficult. We're our own worst critics, and we can be very self-critical. We can talk to ourselves in a way that we would never talk to other people. Mm-hmm. So the non-judgment, it doesn't just apply to how we interact with others. It starts first and foremost with ourselves, sure. And it really requires us to introduce some kindness into how we. We approach or meet the thoughts that come up. So our inclination might be, oh my God, you're thinking that again? Or you dummy, why did you do that? Mm-hmm. So it really is a shift in beginning to bring in a little bit of kindness and think, oh, okay, so, I know that wasn't the best thing, but it happens to the best of us, common humanity. This is somewhere where we can bring in the self-compassion and common humanity, that this is not an experience that's unique to us, and that we can bring a little bit of kindness and recognize that how we're feeling is, we can be very harsh and say, you shouldn't be feeling that way, and just be very judgmental. Where if we can begin to bring a little kindness to how we approach everything, including others, but we have to start being kind to ourselves before we can be kind to others. So having this idea that introducing kindness, a kinder voice, and playing with that. And when we have that tendency to be very harsh and judgmental, to take a moment to observe that. Oh, like what's happening here? And once we become the observer, then it puts a little bit of a distance. We're not as sticky, we're not as close to it, and we can have a little bit of clarity. It's almost like, you're living your experience, and you can easily get just sucked in and pulled every which way. And then mindfulness has us being very present, being in this moment, in this body, and then we can almost, as the observer, it gives a little bit of impartiality. And so then we can begin to introduce this idea of kindness and self-compassion a little more easily, rather than getting kind of pulled into the thought and the judgment. And let's not forget, just because we're having a thought does not mean it's true. And generally speaking, if you're having an intuitive feeling or some physical sensation or emotion, and the thought is different, you can generally be sure that the emotions and the feelings are true and the thought is not. And so we can begin to shift that harshness, the judgmental, when we give ourselves the space to observe what we're doing and be curious. Oh, why did I say that? Oh, there's that thing from 10 years ago that's coming back up again that I can't get rid of and that I think about myself. And so mindfulness is a really great way to begin to, investigate our own experience. Yeah. So.
Thank you. I'm struck at the, I'm repeatedly struck at the parallels in life, but in this moment, I'm struck at the parallels between the sort of traditional psychotherapeutic process that we use in the mental health community and the approach of mindfulness, and sort of see that intersection.
Yeah, it definitely comes together.
So powerful. Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So I am going to move along, unless there's any other questions. I'm going to move along just to some practices and some tips that, the folks out there can use with their families right now. If you have young children, you can buy this on Amazon for $6. And it's a fun thing just to use. One thing we have to teach our children is how to breathe. Suddenly you're faced with something unwanted or a difficulty or a test or something. You go, what do we do? Hold our breath, right? So we have the importance of breathing and that too is very well documented. The breath and deep breathing really triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which is one of the branches of the autonomic nervous system, and it's responsible for restoring calm to the body. So really focusing on breathing and deep breathing is incredibly important. So teaching your children how to breathe. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, we breathe all the time, but some of us don't even breathe properly. We breathe very shallowly. So really paying attention to belly breathing, feeling the belly going in and out. And we can use this like breathing in, inhaling, and then exhaling. And you can give this to your child to be playing with as you're breathing in and then breathing out. So this is kind of a fun thing.
What was that called, Catherine?
This is called the breathing ball, and you can get this on Amazon. And then there's something else that can be very useful. And it's funny, I learned this from a colleague whose name is Corey Muscara, actually, and we work with him. He said he's used this on children, and I've heard it mostly used with children, but he has used it with executives as well. It's take 5. It's take 5 breath practice. So you take your hand and you take the forefinger of your other hand and you place it right in the middle of the palm, and you begin to trace your hand. And yeah, everybody do it with me. So we're going to start by just inhaling and then coming back up to the middle, exhaling, and then inhaling down the forefinger, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling. 2 more on your own. And you can probably notice that from the time you start to the time you finish, your breath has slowed down. So that's another really good one to do. You can do it sitting at your desk. If you teach it to your child, you can do it sitting at your desk before a test. As an adult, you can do it. If you need a moment to just breathe, you can sit there and take 3 deep breaths, or you can do this. The breath is one of the most powerful tools we have in regrounding, reorienting, recentering ourselves. Then there's another thing called the soothing touch, which, if your child is having a hard time with something, grades or sports or friends, you can just teach them how to soothe themselves. And, there's very many different ways. You can, place a hand over your heart, or maybe, and playing with it and sort of experimenting with your child, what feels good for you? Ask them, what feels good? Does it feel good to put your hand on your cheek or here? Or maybe it feels good for you just to do this. And then really just while you're because the tactile, again, it's been researched, it's been shown when we touch ourselves or others, there's that mammalian response, that mammalian caregiving response that occurs, and the release of oxytocin. And so you can begin to just say, yeah, it's really hard and it's okay. You can acknowledge, teach your child, it's hard. What I'm feeling is really hard. But also know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. And it's okay to feel this way. And you got this. You can do this. You got this. And it's amazing what a couple of minutes of doing this and teaching your children to do this for themselves, what it can do. And then I have 2 more, because we have tons, and I'm at the end, I'll give all my information. I'm happy to talk to anyone, give resources. There's a really 2 more important things that I want to talk about, and that's gratitude. So another, I've mentioned the word research and studies a lot, but it just really validates how important and how effective the mindfulness is, and gratitude is another such thing. Research shows that the neurochemistry that our brain is in when we're in a state of gratitude simply does not support negative emotions, right? That's a pretty powerful statement. So you can actually create a positive mood and positive state of mind by taking a moment to think about something you're grateful for. But it has to be heartfelt. So you really have to call to mind, something that you are really grateful for, and really feel it in the body as you're thinking about this gratitude. And there's ways of practicing this. You can keep a gratitude journal, enter 3 things at night, just 3 words, 3 sentences at night. But I'm going to share with you what I have done. And, we had this practice with our children growing up. And now my adult married daughter, she's a young, newly married daughter. She does this with her new husband at the dinner table. So we had dinner, we only had time for dinner once a week, and it was Friday nights. And we would go around the table and we would express what our high of the week was, our low of the week was. This way we knew what was going on with our kids, and our kids knew what was going on with us, the highs and the lows. And then we would end with, what are we grateful for? I suggest you try it. It is such a wonderful thing to do at the dinner table. Okay. And then lastly, I will share with you savoring. And again, studies show that people who savor their experiences are actually more resilient. And so I have a game that I want to share with you that you can do with your kids. Instead of, remember I Spy with my little eye? It's very similar to that. So it's called the Sense and Savor game. So, you'll take turns with whoever, you're playing with, just you and your child or the whole family. You'll take turns reflecting and just say, really reflect on a recent positive experience. For example, your child recalls Sparkles, the family dog, nuzzling their little cold, wet nose in the fold of their neck. And so then the savor part of this is have the child describe the experience, right? Like really let them think about, well, how did that feel? Oh, it tickled, it made me laugh, and I felt warm and fuzzy all over. So that's what I'm going to leave you with, those few practices. And there's so many more that you can make mindfulness fun. It doesn't have to be a chore.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine. That was wonderful. I
Pleasure.
have all my notes down, and that was terrific. And thank you for all your work that you do. I know you're so generous with your time for so many organizations, and for those who are attending, you can contact Catherine at the Krame Center, or you could email me and I'll make the connection of any of the resources that we have. So I actually had a couple of questions for the group that were emailed to me, not in the chat. And if anyone attending has questions, feel free to put it in the chat, email me, or of course, you could text me. So here's the first question. My teenager son seems to be getting addicted to online chatting since COVID. He is getting, I'm trying to paraphrase it. He's becoming more and more, I'm using the word obsessive. This person didn't. He often doesn't know what is going on around him because he's at that age of, online social media and chatting. Should the parent be concerned? What should the parent do?
That might be a better question for you, Michael.
Want me to jump in? Sure. Great question, and not an unusual one in COVID times.
Nice.
Our relationship to technology has really changed since March. I think up to this point, we were, I think, as a country, we were kind of ambivalent about technology. We thought the kids were on their devices too much, and we were a little too addicted to it in terms of our own social media. And we really revisited that in so many ways, I think, for the positive. This is a good example, though, of a concern, and I certainly hear it. I think what I would do is probably take my young gentleman out, not when he's on his telephone, not when he wants to be on his device. Typically with boys of that age, I'm a big fan of going for a ride in the car, because that front seat, looking forward, just traveling, there's a little less intensity to it. To really connect it back to something that Catherine shared earlier, there's less judgmentalness to it as well. And really just state your concern in a very neutral way. I'm a little concerned that you're into the technology a little too much, a little too deep, and I get worried when there's things going on around you that you're not seeing. I would ask what he thinks about that, and the trick here would be to ask that question and to really, in a really very quiet way, listen and really take it in and try to use, again, a Catherine analogy, to take that breath and then not jump right into the reaction. Pause in that middle and think a little bit about what he's saying. Try to figure out really what's going on, and then ask him, I'm concerned about it. What do you think we can do about this? Do you think that we should put parameters around it? I find with kids, particularly that age, if there's a concern that is a boundary type setting, often sharing that experience or sharing that concern, they often are very creative in terms of problem solving for themselves, by the way. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised if he actually unto himself has some suggestions. It's all going to be about the approach. Steal some of Catherine's ideas and approach it in a neutral.
I love the car, Michael. The car has been invaluable over the years of raising two teenagers, and I had to replace my steering wheel 3 times because of what I'm hearing, and I keep channeling Michael Tozzoli. Just listen, just listen, just listen. I think one car, the guy asked, "What's up with the imprints on the steering wheel?" I said, "That was 13 and 14 years."
Years ago, I had
I was 13 and 14 at that
a
time.
clinical supervisor who very many years ago said to me, Mother Nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. If we sort of stick to that ratio, life is really going to go well. And
I
so
love that.
I try to keep that in mind.
I love that. Yeah, I'm familiar with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great advice there. I'm looking at the chat and I see that Katie has a question.
Yes.
She's asking at what age can you start these
Good question.
practices? Yeah, it's a great question. I have a 2-year-old and would love to start something. And yeah, it's really never too early to start. And look, we're not framing it like I'm going to teach you mindfulness. We can start with a 2-year-old if our 2-year-old is having a temper tantrum. Just taking them and saying, hey, come on, let's breathe together. Come on, breathe with mommy. We can start with the breath. The breath is a great place to start, and we can introduce that, putting the hands on the belly, and I'm not talking about when they're having a temper tantrum now, but, with the young children, we can, the tactile, bringing awareness into the body is one of the most important things in mindfulness, right? Making that connection, because our body has the signals that we're going into the fight or flight long before it registers in the brain. So being very intimately aware of our own physical sensations. So it's never too early to start putting the hands on the belly. Whoa, watch that belly, expand when we're breathing out, and then breathing in, and, think of it like a balloon, and what color is your balloon, and watch that balloon inflate and then deflate. So these are all ways you can begin with someone as young as 2. And then some of the other games, that we were talking about earlier, the savoring, they have to be a little bit older, but certainly just, and I'm going to give one more sort of example of, it starts with us, right? Just like in the airplane when the oxygen mask comes down, or they're giving the demonstration and they say, well, first put the oxygen mask on yourself before you try to help somebody else. So really embodying the mindfulness, you'd be surprised at how it has a ripple effect and affects those around you, including your family members. So even your young children, but certainly, yes, you can begin a practice with even a 2-year-old. Just focus on the breathing and make it fun.
That's great.
Great question.
Question that was emailed to me. How can a parent who has a teenager and how can a parent with a teenager who's wanting to become independent, how can he or she decipher, is it a healthy independence, healthy isolation, during this COVID? When is it healthy? And when is it just natural for the young teenager to make that next developmental, change?
Mm-hmm. In terms of pulling back from a parent or perceived to be sort of separating?
Yeah, should they be worried that they're isolating during this pandemic time? I'm sorry. Or is it, I'm trying to read and I have 3 screens growing.
No, understood.
Right? We
it's always the question, right? What's the balance?
Right.
And so 2 things come to my mind right away. One would be that what we sort of view as sort of that parental instinct. So I get the rules and I certainly understand the household, but what does your mom's stomach tell you? Are you concerned about that? Do you feel a tightness? Often that intuition that a parent has, because there's a connectivity and there's all kinds of communication that goes on in a nonverbal way. If you're worried about it, I would certainly have that discussion. I think that what I would do with someone that age is to really have a conversation with them. But I might make it a little bit different than the last conversation. I might talk about myself a little bit. So that parental sort of use of self, saying, I find myself just wanting to, be on my computer, do my work, do my emails, and really sort of shut the world out. And I'm not sure that that's healthy for me. Do you ever experience that? What's that like for you? And joining them essentially, because you want to stay away from that sort of finger pointing of you're doing something again that even being perceived as judgmental will shut a teenager down. So this is an opportunity to join and be together, because in all honesty, We're all struggling with this at this moment. 90 seconds ago, Dr. Murphy talked about him having 3 screens in the one room. So you can't help but pause there for a moment and say, that's intense, man. That just has a level of intensity. And so I would use self a little bit in that one, because then it's sort of, how can we problem solve together? By the way, be very ready for the lots of advice from your teenager to you about what needs to be done and what you can change. And certainly being open to that is a big help. So
that's great. Tatiana had a question. Besides breathing, what else can I do to help a 5-year-old deal with his frustrations?
So from the mental health perspective, or from, I guess, the mindfulness perspective, I can share something there.
Great.
I think that we can talk to our children in ways like naming and putting colors and shapes and sizes. Well, how's that frustration, investigating together? How is that frustration, or whatever the challenge is in the moment? So if you had to describe it and put a color to it, and talking about it, I think naming it can be very helpful. Certainly taking a deep breath. Let's take a breath before we start, and then if they're not able to really articulate it in the way that you and I would articulate a challenge or a disappointment, then maybe talking about, where does it feel? What does it feel like in the body? Where do you feel it in the body? And then try to describe that, maybe with a shape or a color or a sensation. So really, again, tying it back to the body, that's a really good way to investigate some of our challenges, particularly emotional challenges, because the emotions show up in the body. And Michael, you might have something you want to add to that.
Catherine, I love how I'm about to answer the question and say almost the same thing you did, only using our lingo. And so it's just again, that sort of that parallel process, and that what comes to my mind is 2 things. One, I would be looking at my young son when he's not frustrated and try to figure out what's going on there. Not when he's frustrated, when he's feeling well. Is it when he's creative? So sometimes boys in particular have difficulty articulating. So that can be very frustrating to them. So to use a little bit of Catherine's ideas, coloring, drawing, expressive, play, other things, and trying to figure out, again, when it's going well, why it's going well. He may be more tactile. He may be just different in how he communicates. And so really spreading that out and making sure you have lots of different tools, words, colors, toys, coloring, drawing, and really having kind of a toolbox of what to do what a young man is, or a young daughter for that matter. But boys in particular at that age can be just a little bit lagging in terms of articulating how they're feeling. It takes just a little bit of extra time sometimes.
Now, Michael, I'm 52.
Fair point. We're gonna get you some crayons, Matthew, and then
Well, that next board meeting, I'm gonna have a breathing ball. I'm gonna be breathing. I'm gonna be coloring.
I love it.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Catherine, for coming and sharing. Just you never cease to amaze me every time I work with the Krame Center. So I appreciate you coming out. And Michael, you are absolutely God's gift to the Ramsey community and what West Bergen. For those who don't know, West Bergen has been our go-to organization in my 7 years. It has, in my mind, saved countless lives, and families have kept families together.
I very much appreciate that. I really do. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership in calling out mental health as an important topic, because it really, you are truly a leader in that, and I appreciate that more than you know, actually.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry, Catherine, go ahead.
I was going to say thank you both for the work that you do. I really admire. I've been, as Michael said, a friend, and I've attended many of the events at West Bergen Mental Health, and I see all the valuable work that you do, and you as well, Dr. Murphy.
Oh, thank you.
And I just want to say that for anyone who has any questions, do not hesitate to reach out for me at thekramecenter.org. That's our website. My email is Catherine@thekramecenter.org. And, you know, we have free meditations. We have all kinds of things going on all the time. And just follow us on social media and you'll know what we're doing.
Yep.
Our handle is @the Center on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But really, you know, I really have no problem speaking to anyone about any problem where mindfulness might be something that can, you know, that can help if I can give any advice. So back to you. I didn't mean to.
No, please, Catherine, please, please. That's another thing we have to do, Michael. We got to get a Twitter handle, Instagram, and a Facebook. Let's
Right.
talk.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
I wrote that down. I need a fourth screen. Our next Let's Talking Mental Health is, November 19th, Thursday night, November 19th. And we've already booked our next special guest. Her name is Carly Bushhoven. For those who are some Ramsey parents, you remember Carly spoke to us 2 years ago. She is the older sister of Madison Holleran, and she runs the Madison Holleran Foundation. And she spoke to our community 2 or 3 years ago about the need of our young people to slow their lives down a little bit in that quest of being perfect. It was a very powerful talk Carly followed up our book talk on What Made Maddie Run about her sister, Madison Holleran. So she has graciously accepted to come be our next special guest. So please, folks, spread the word. November 19th at 8 p.m. We'll be back talking mental health. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.